Julian Assange. As for slavery, well, if you want to go there, my friend, let's go there.
But not too far.
Well, I mean, this is a conversation that is mind-boggling to me in the West. Let's be very clear. The reason there is no slavery in the world today, I mean, there's a lot of slavery in the world today, but in the parts of the world where there's no slavery, is because the British Empire ended it. That's why there is no slavery. That is, well, look, the fact that you are uneducated about history doesn't mean it's funny. So let me educate you now. Let me educate you now. Let me educate you now. I know that the woke narrative and the anti-Western narrative on slavery, well, you're not practicing free speech very well, are you? You're not practicing free speech very well, are you?
We
the
will
moment
keep,
I say something you don't like,
we have to
you're
keep
not practicing free speech very well, are you, sir?
Thank you.
I thought you were all about free speech. How about you let me finish my point?
Let's finish the point, and then I'm going to...
Now.
And then I will bring it to our on-stage
and
audience.
The anti-Western narrative on slavery is there was no slavery, and then the British or the Americans came along and they started slavery. Slaves were the first good that were ever traded between human beings, ever. They were the first good ever traded. Native Americans had slaves, Ottomans had slaves, African had slaves, everybody had slaves. The reason there is no slavery in the West is the British Empire, having practiced slavery for a long time, like everybody else, ended it. Not only that, the British Empire then spent a tremendous amount of blood and treasure to force the Middle Eastern slave traders, with the trans-Saharan slave trade being much worse than the transatlantic slave trade.
Constantine, that is not what this gentleman said.
In terms of the number of people who were killed,
Constantine, let's just bring in Steve for a second. In terms of how long it lasted, it was much worse. And we spent a tremendous amount of blood and treasure to stop it. That's the true history of slavery.
That's not what the gentleman said. I heard what the gentleman said.
Well, I couldn't hear him very well, so if we talk about slavery,
come in
that's
and
what we
say, I
talk
think
about.
it's very, very important what you said, because you said something that, in fact, is interesting. And this goes to...
Wow, 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 folks. Konstantin Kisin gives absolutely no quarter. You saw what was happening in the audience. He made the statement saying that it was Great Britain was the first country to abolish slavery. And not only did he abolish slavery, but it went out of its way, as he said, in terms of blood and treasure on the high seas with the British Navy, preventing other nations that were conducting slavery to stop them on the high seas, free those slaves. And it cost them millions of pounds to do this. And also loss of life in terms of those men and women, well, those men basically at that time, who went out on the high seas to stop this trade, to stop the slave trade. And when we're talking about the Saharan slave trade versus the transatlantic, there is absolutely no comparison whatsoever. But this is the reaction, folks, that you're going to get, and the roll of the eyes, as if this is like, you know, people are making up lies or whatever. This is the type of reaction that you get from people that don't have any idea of the historical nature of where slave trading began, and that every nation was involved from time immemorial. Watch this guy that's not in the audience, but he's on stage as one of the participants, this young man. Just watch his face when Konstantin Kisin basically tells everybody that it was Great Britain that was the first nation to abolish slavery and tried to stop it. Watch this.
And large, you're going to be fine. I take your point, and I made it myself about Julian Assange. As for slavery, well, if you want to go there, my friend, let's go there.
But not too far.
Well, I mean, this is a conversation that is mind-boggling to me in the West. Let's be very clear. The reason there is no slavery in the world today, I mean, there's a lot of slavery in the world today, but in the parts of the world where there's no slavery, is because the British Empire ended it. That's why there is no slavery.
Right there, folks. That's the face that I'm talking about. That's all you have to see right there. As if, you know what the hell are you talking about, Konstantin? That's not true. We all know that it is. But when you hear, you know, people talk on the liberal or the leftist side, they want to omit that fact. They want to bury that in history. And they just want to make it look like that it was the Western powers that were basically not doing the things, and no other nations at all. African nations weren't involved. Egyptian nations weren't involved. It wasn't any of the other Mediterranean nations. It was only the United Kingdom and America and other Western nations, at that time. So let's hear from this young man and see what he's going to bring to the table, all right, and hear his, his thinking, his thought process. Let's go this right now, and we're going to follow it up with another person on the stage. And when you hear what that guy has to say, folks, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about, that where these leftists, where these liberals, where their talking points come from, and how they've shaped the reality, the perception in their minds as to why the Western democracies are so bad. My question to them is, then what are you still living in the Western democracies? Why not pick another place that you think is so much better? Let's hear their response.
I just want to say something real quick. If we look at the social media conglomerates in the United States, like Meta, Facebook, and so forth, they have a lot of scandals and cases against them of mishandling data. And I think it's besides the point to, say that somehow banning TikTok is justified, when in reality it's offering a more decentralized way for people to choose to consume that media or not. The American people, like you say, people in the West, they're free as much as they want to use Facebook and not use TikTok. So banning it is besides the point. And what we've seen in protests in the UK is that there were so many individuals who were highlighted by official accounts in the UK Home Office saying, we're looking for this person. They were holding a poster that they didn't like. And they go to prison, they get questioned, they lose their jobs. We saw what happened with Julian Assange. The second someone tries to offer a counter-narrative to the crimes of humanity committed by the West in Iraq and so forth, they get ostracized for 14 years in prison, can't see their family, and it leaves an example for future journalists. Look at us. We were afraid to speak up, and yeah, that's what I believe.
Okay, let me just,
So in regards to response to the young man that just finished speaking, who's the one that rolled his eyes when Konstantin Kisin basically said that, England was the one that abolished slavery first and tried to stop it everywhere else around the world. I agree with the points that he was talking about in terms of, yes, in the Western democracies, okay, free speech is being punished. Just like he said in England, if you say something wrong, you call somebody a name, say someone's fat or short or misgender somebody, or just whatever it is that's not in agreement with what the statist government of the United Kingdom is at this point, they send the police after you. Julian Assange for basically exhibiting his free speech rights, whatever you may think of how we got the information or whatever. Listen, if you get the information somehow and you want to put it out there, hey, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that is fair game, because if the government or an entity can gather information and hide it from everybody, if that's fair game in that respect, why is it not fair game if somebody gets that information to let the world know or the people know that this is what these entities or these governments are doing, which they shouldn't be doing, and let the people decide for themselves whether or not they're agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. Anyways, let's go on and hear what this gentleman has to say.
My name is Adris. I'm studying biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences at Leeds University. I mean, I think everybody's obviously making great points. But Konstantin, I want to ask you about, you say how great the Western world is. So I was actually born here in the UK itself. The Western world's actually not that great, because the reason being is, what about slavery? Say, for example, obviously all the innocent people that are from different ethnic minorities are obviously being slave-driven, and their voices are not being heard. So freedom of speech really doesn't exist, I don't think, in the Western world.
What about slavery?
So, I mean, folks, I don't know what to say. This isn't the greatest country in the world. He was born in England, raised there, and yet somehow his thinking, because he probably went to Leeds, right? He said he's at Leeds, I guess, or some, elite university where they just teach these students how to be woke. And they teach them how to hate their country, hate Westernism, hate everything about it, the culture, whatever religions are practiced. The monarchy is terrible. White people are terrible. White people have privilege. Look, there are countries all around the world still that have slavery. Now, it might be indentured servitude. It may not be, obviously, it's not even as close as to the level, but there's sex trafficking going on. There's people that, I mean, there's a caste system like in India and other Asian countries and other places. There's children that are, young children, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old or younger, older, that are working in conditions. Would you consider that to be, slave type conditions? The fact of the matter is that if you want to be living in a country that is completely free, that you're not going to be under the thumb of somebody, under the rule of somebody, the only place in the world, folks, are the Western democracies, are places like England, United States, Canada, Australia, France. Yes, we all have our problems. But are you telling me that somebody from sub-Saharan Africa living in those conditions, would they rather trade and come to a Western democracy country? Why are so many millions of people from around the world, taking in their own hands with their families, their children, and making the dangerous, trek either by a boat or, walking or whatever means necessary to try to get to England, to Spain, to France, to America, to Canada? Why are they doing it if they're happy where they're at? We ask that question. We never get a good response to it. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow. You all know what to do. Take a look at our video links above and below. My final thought is always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.